Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this gLOCAL 2024 event. My name is Renata Mirulla. I am the facilitator of the EvalForward Community of Practice, which is co-organizing this event. EvalForward is a joint initiative of FAO, IFAD, WFP, and CGIAR, and I'm happy to open the first of our gLOCAL events of this year. It is about how evaluations contribute to addressing transformational change towards gender equality, with a focus on agriculture research. This aligns with the gLOCAL main theme, which, as you may recall, is evaluation and transformational change. And we all know, I really thank you for being today with us, because we know the gLOCAL is always a very busy week, and this year there were more than 370 events organized in different time zones, but still it's a large amount. I just want to invite you to use the Q&A. This event is set as a webinar, so you have a Q&A function to ask your questions. So I invite you to use that, but you can still also use the chat if it's easier for you. And I'll just, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the facilitator of this session. But let me introduce her, Justine van Rooyen. She is the Regional Gender Advisor at the UN World Food Programme. She supports country offices in the South Africa region to promote the integration of gender equality and women empowerment in the design and implementation of projects towards zero hunger. I want to just say that her favorite quote is "Empower a woman, empower a nation." So I think it's central to her approach, but also somehow to the webinar today. So I hope you will enjoy, and over to you, Justine. Thanks. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Renata. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues and guests. Thanks for joining this session. Today we have two dynamic speakers that will contribute to the session and give us some rich feedback and ideas. We have Monica Lomena-Gelis, who is a Senior Evaluation Officer at IFAD, and we have Svetlana Negroustouvea, who is the Evaluation Function Lead at CGIAR. So Monica is an environmentalist and an evaluator with 20 years of professional experience in development in Latin America and the African continent. Before joining IFAD, she worked for several development banks and other UN agencies, NGOs, and in the private sector. She's been actively engaged in various evaluations and networks. So welcome, Monica. I'm going to also go through Svetlana's bio, and then Monica will take over with the first presentation. So Svetlana leads in the evaluation function at CGIAR. She has 20 plus years managing evaluations in international development context within the African Development Bank, the Climate Investment Funds, and Global Environmental Facility, DFID, and USAID. She's managed the gender platform evaluation and leads in the development of gender and evaluation guidelines at CGIAR. And she was the co-chair of the Eval Gender Plus. So today our speakers will take us through the work that they've conducted in their organizations on thematic evaluations and looking at the gender platform as well. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Monica. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you very much, Justine. Yeah, Renata, please, if you can share the presentation. I promise I will try to be short, because the idea it's more to have some time for questions, answers, but also discussion from the experience of people connected. As Justine presented, I'm going to talk about an evaluation that was conducted by IFAD, the Independent Office of Evaluation. In fact, this evaluation is not totally finished. We are going to present the results in the coming weeks at the board of directors. But I wanted to share with you some of the aspects of the methodology and how we try to assess transformational change towards gender equality. Next slide, please. These are the objectives of this evaluation. We assess the development effectiveness and the contribution of IFAD and IFAD interventions, meaning grants and investment projects, to gender equality and women's empowerment, which is an objective that the organization has. And I'll show you in the next slide what are the corporate documents about it. And also the second objective of this evaluation was to inform or to improve the future policies, strategies, and interventions, not only about gender, but also the sectoral policies that IFAD has in relation to rural development. The scope that we took starts from 2012, because as you will see in the next slide, please, Renata. It's in 2012 that the IFAD approved its first full-fledged policy on gender equality, coming from a corporate level evaluation by my office in 2010. And in this presentation, of course, I'm not going to present everything we have done in this evaluation, but I wanted to focus in two specific moments in this timeline. If you can press again, Renata, please, twice. Again, please. So if you see these two red circles, these are the moments in 2016 and in 2019 where IFAD decided to move beyond what we call gender mainstreaming, that is just assessing the implications of any action for rural men and women, of what IFAD does, and try to address the root causes, that it's this concept of gender transformative changes, gender transformative approaches that have been included in IFAD interventions for a number of years. So what I'm going to show you is some of the methodology that we tested to try to see what is the contribution of IFAD on this regard. In the next slide, you can see some of the key concepts as are defined in key documents in IFAD. As I mentioned, the policy in 2012 has these three strategic objectives: economic empowerment, equal voice for men and women. For instance, in cooperatives, the cooperatives that we support, and also more equitable shared workloads. In 2016, as I said, we started moving to address the root causes, including social norms, attitudes, and behaviors and social systems, under the hypothesis that gender mainstreaming was not enough to reach the objectives of the policy. The Gender Action Plan in 2019-2025, that is going to be revised and renewed next year with the findings of this evaluation, is called Mainstreaming Gender Transformative Approaches because of this reason, trying to go beyond and touch on the gender power dynamics at the local level, at the communities where IFAD is working. In the next slide, I'll show you very briefly how we try to assess how different factors and what types of activities are included in IFAD's projects that could lead to gender outcomes. What we did was to use the IFAD gender marker, that is this kind of a scale from 1 to 6, and it's used from design to completion, and we also use it during evaluation to see if a project is considering gender in a sufficient way. If you click again, Renata, what we did was to cluster projects that were evaluated as 5 or 6 with a high gender outcome, and cluster other projects that were like with low gender outcome in red here. And in the next slide, you will see very briefly the theory of change or the analytical framework that we use. Click again, please, Renata. And we use this qualitative comparative analysis, which is methodology which allows you to see how the combination of different factors, different characteristics of a project, including characteristics of the context, play together to yield certain results. So basically, what you see here are are the GEWE practices, the types of activities that we could identify that are commonly included in IFAD projects. And the ones in yellow are from the first strategic objective on economic empowerment. In blue, the ones about voice and representation. The green ones are on equitable workloads. And the ones in purple are all these practices that through interviews and case studies, we saw that are like addressing some of the root causes of gender inequality in different contexts where IFAD is working. As you see on the bottom side of the slide, we also factor certain contextual factors, and this is just the result. We tried many different dimensions, and at the end, what you are going to see in the next slide is that we came up with certain models. Click 3 times, please, Renata. Sorry about that. That's fine. And what the QCA produces is this type of, they are called Venn diagrams, where what you see there are like different projects and their characteristics. So for instance, in this Venn diagram on the right side, what you see is that there are projects in certain countries that are very similar in many characteristics, but some of them had good gender results and are in green, and the others had very like a low rating for gender, which are in pink. And then what we did with that was to see what are these factors, these ingredients in certain contexts that made a project succeed in terms of gender outcomes or not. This is just an example. The software, the methodology gives you like many different combinations. And this was then used when we were doing the field work to try to understand better those factors. Another finding when using this QCA was that there was one of these dimensions that was, as the QCA experts say, single-handed. It was sufficient for a project not to have a gender rating very low. So engaging with women's organizations in Vietnam, I remember, in China and in other contexts, was giving extra results in relation to an IFAD project where these actors were not involved. We also found that in this combination of practices, having economic empowerment was always working well. This is, of course, the iceberg tip of what we found, but I wanted just to share this methodology because it was useful to see how context matters and what are the combination of factors in different countries to go beyond the typical country case studies. We did 11 in total, but this gave us another layer of evidence to try to see a little bit beyond the specific country case studies. My next slide shows some takeaways. You can click to all of them, Renata, thank you. So basically, the main takeaway is that, of course, as we all know, gender transformative changes are highly context specific, and what we found with this methodology was what are the factors that are important, but we need to consider these implementation factors also when designing these projects. When we want to go this extra mile and touch on the gender norms at the community, local level, or whatever level we are aiming to
Monica, I think we lost you for a few seconds, Monica.
Yeah, it says I'm at the office, but it says the internet connection isn't stable. That's interesting.
So you can repeat your last sentence.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Renata. Roman's Wi-Fi. So basically, what I was saying is that another finding was that we need extra capacity building efforts if we want to address some of the root causes of gender inequality, because there is lots of confusion about what it means. And I think this we can discuss during the discussion with all the participants. And we found in IFAD that many of our projects, almost 100, have included household methodologies like gender action learning system and others that are considered gender transformative approaches. but the evidence of their results, their cost, and even their outreach is not well reported. So we are calling in this evaluation to try to get better evidence before rolling out certain approaches. My last slide, please, Renata. It's about some of the tools, the ideas, and what we are going to do to try to enhance learning and the use of this evaluation. During the process of the evaluation, we have engaged continuously with a group of people, IFAD staff, that work in different divisions and departments, to try to engage with them, not just sharing the report at the end. And they have also promoted the participation. For instance, we launched an electronic survey, and we managed to get like almost 700 answers, I think, thanks to this engagement. We are going to present this report in 15 days at the evaluation committee of the board, and it's going to inform the new gender policy and the 2025 gender action plan. And then management of IFAD will respond formally with what we call here a management response. And then there is a whole system more for accountability purposes, that is this Prisma, where we follow what is the implementation status of each one of the recommendations. And then, of course, we will do a learning event internally about the evaluation, and then more venues like this one. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for the internet issue.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think you highlighted a few of the very important components of gender transformative work, and especially by highlighting the importance of economic empowerment, voice and representation, more equitable workload, and norms and culture. But the key takeaways when we look at this presentation, you highlighted the importance of working with women-led organizations, so being very contextual, and also looking at economic empowerment as a key to successful projects. Thank you so much for that. We'll hold those key takeaways for the discussion as we move forward. And over to you, Svetlana, for your presentation.
Thank you, colleagues. Good time of day, everyone, and I'm happy to follow after friend and colleague Monica. I will be presenting findings from the evaluation of gender platform of CGIAR, and this evaluation is complete. And in fact, last year at this very week on gLOCAL, we presented when it was not complete, and we also just talked about kind of approaches and ongoing learning. And now we're very happy to have this opportunity to present the results and then frame some. So we'll proceed to the next slide. For those of you who don't know, and I'm pretty sure there's many of you who don't know CGIAR, it's not such a widely known organization, or maybe pieces of it. CGIAR is a global research partnership for food secure future dedicated to transforming food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. It's a partnership, and the work is implemented through research institutes, research organizations, which are listed on the left. And maybe some of you know some of those organizations. For example, IFPRI, which is the organization that International Food Policy Research Institute, and they, for example, have led the development and implementation of the Women Empowerment and Agriculture Index, which I'm sure many of the colleagues on this particular group know, and some others. And those centers actually are primarily based in the Global South, with an exception of IFPRI. So this is kind of where we are, and this is the context in which we evaluate. What guides our evaluations is the framework, which is very standard, but it's important because our organization is different from UN or bilateral organizations. So we kind of need to bring the standards and practices into our work that at least compare us somehow. So maybe we're going next. The core of our work is the strategy of CGIAR strategy is the 2030 also research strategy, and I know it's a busy slide, but on the right it basically highlights what we do, and the word science is everywhere. Science and research, research and science, and impacts, and it's the research for development organization, and it's very important to understand that what the research is, what science is, and the context in which we operate, because it's not a multilateral development organization. What was highlighted above in the red was that the impact areas are the 5 impact areas which all link to SDGs, and one of them is on gender equality, which is gender equality, youth, and social inclusion. So this is directly related to this discussion. Thank you. Next. So Gender Platform it's a platform. It's a virtual space with collaborations by partners within CGIAR and external to CGIAR, and it supports the implementation of the 2030 CGIAR research strategy. Interestingly, there is no gender strategy in CGIAR per se, and there's no strategy for gender equality, inclusion, social inclusion. There tend to be strategies that are specific to themes, for example, livestock or fish, aquacultures and fish. There is a gender diversity and inclusion action plan, and it relates mostly to workplace. Since 2020, the OECD gender tagging has started on the implementation modalities, which are initiatives, and it's a new requirement. For the platform, which transitioned recently to the SDG through this impact platform from original intent of just being the virtual space, and the standard processes and objectives of the evaluation apply to assess the progress, document lessons, and think about forward-looking recommendations for the expanding of the platform beyond gender to also include social inclusion and youth. Thank you. Luckily, we were joined as we were contemplating the development of the terms of reference and inception report for the evaluation. We were joined by Donna Pottoms, who some of you might know. She is one of the leaders in the feminist evaluation in our evaluation space. And she actually used this opportunity to pretest her principles feminist evaluation methodology on this evaluation. It was very useful for the evaluation. And in fact, the principles that she was using in that approach aligned to the actual principles of the gender platform itself. Related to support, inclusion, responsiveness, value addition, transparency, and accountability, reflection, and feedback. All of those coincided very nicely and made the evaluation much smoother and user-friendly process. Moving on, thank you. The link here to the last year's presentation is where Dawn presents actually this work, kind of thinking about and how she was implementing this to the gender platform evaluation. But for us, of course, it's important that there was use of a mix of evaluation theories, participation evaluation, feminist principle evaluation, utilization-focused evaluation. So the users were at the core of this work. And it's important also to later get into the users, because the users of the CGIAR work and the platform work in particular is end users who are supposed to be reached by the platform itself. And they might not be necessarily the agricultural kind of farmer societies or others, because it's done in the research for development context. Thank you. One of the participatory ways of engaging with the leadership through the evaluation was conducting an evaluability assessment. And it helped us understand better where the platform was to start with, because also some of the funders were not clear to conduct the evaluation or not, because it was relatively fresh. There was only 2 years of implementation when they were already transitioning into the expanded portfolio. But we found this tool very useful and useful to engage with the platform. They, for example, indicated, how exactly, even if they didn't have something, it did not meet one of the criteria in terms of, what types of indicators they had or what documentation they had. They specifically requested that recommendation makes recommendations related to those, related to whether to employ an M&E person, for example, full-time or not, and some very concrete requests at the start of the design of the evaluation. Thank you. Another important, go on, next. Another important methodological and approach was the fact that, again, we are in the research for development context. So for us, evaluating quality of science and aspects related to science and research are at the core of what we do every time in all of our evaluations. And we have an evaluation criterion dedicated to that in our work and a dedicated guidelines on how to look at quality of science. And in that is very important and kind of notable learning was that bringing credibility and legitimacy of science to make sure that everybody is involved in delivering science, conducting science, and can reap the benefits of the scientific and research work provided by organization. And the lens were used to critically assess the results of the work of the platform and the outputs that the platform has produced. And here also we can say that the concepts, the practices that were aligning to the gender platform itself, to feminist principle evaluation, and to what constitutes good quality, what science, which is encompassed in credibility and legitimacy of the science align. For example, iterative multi-stakeholder action learning approaches in science and delivery, advancing planning ability accompanied by secure knowledge of your budgets, amounts, and release timings. And I know it sounds, like a mouthful, but in the research continuum, this is very different types of considerations and how things get budgeted for and how research gets implemented, because with the vision of impact, the timelines are different. And of course, research teams with diverse skill sets and importance of field work with multiple stakeholders in developing science and conducting studies. Go ahead. Literally one slide on the findings relates to coherence. And why? Because it is one of the relatively new evaluation criteria of the OECD DAC, and we usually find it extremely useful. And this one actually addresses the findings on this slide, address the transformative side of things. The platform, as I mentioned, expanded from gender platform to include social inclusion and youth, but there were different views within the platform and external to the platform, and the views were equally spread. Basically, that of course, on the one hand, it's good to expand, you get more stakeholders on board. At the same time, with kind of protecting the space for gender and making sure that the messages don't get diluted within programming that becomes wider and then requires more funding, but the funding gets diluted as well as a threat. So, for example, concerns of questioning the platform's focus, how little the shift in focus, guides the funding shifts, and usually there's not much more funding, also, some respondents noted that this is a gender platform, not a woman's platform. So there should not be a youth platform, and this a lot of times came from actually inside the stakeholders. So this is kind of this, I would say, devil's advocate type of commentary, but we found this very interesting throughout the evaluation, and it was reflected in the recommendations. Go on. Thank you. This is just about the coherence. That again, we looked at coherence, and only half of the survey respondents, which were internal and external, they kind of agreed that they effectively managed to spread the knowledge and the wealth. And it is interesting because of the type of the work. It's platform. Again, the platform is about reach. So the work, but they were still very critical of how well it has done. Going on. One of the recommendations that were presented as a result of this evaluation are on this slide, and we're not going to read them both, but eventually as recommendations evolved and the management engaged with them, they did hire program portfolio head, they hired an M&E consultant and a scientist of gender and impact assessments, and they also were developing this position paper on social inclusion in youth, to respond to those constraints and criticisms from within, and make sure that it's better positioning towards SDG 5. Go ahead. Some lessons from our application and this platform evaluation were that transformation is kind of one step at a time, and the baseline of where you start is very important, and the context. And context is always important, but in our case, we found it differently, I would say, important. Standing the ground in terms of defending the methodologies and approaches, for example, feminist principle evaluation was important because somehow it aligned, of course, to, well, it's a gender platform, of course, you would use feminist evaluation, and that was not the case. The focus was on users. Of evaluation process, we were also applying the draft management engagement and response guidelines, and they were also, we felt very comfortable with this work being fed and then contributing to the joint publication between the 4 agencies, and there is a link included. And of course, definitions matter. Beneficiaries versus end users for a platform, they would be different than they would be for IFAD type interaction engagements or WFP or FAO. And of course, transformation is in the eyes of the beholders. Change that is transformational, coherent, and holistic is important, but it's very important to understand the context. And for us, in this particular evaluation, it was much more nuanced to basically go from what has worked to how it can work better, to bring legitimacy to science, to delivery of science. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Svetlana. I think that was really, really interesting and great to learn about this gender platform and to understand that gender work is empirical and we use science to achieve these results. And a lot of the time, I think we get a lot of criticism about gender work because it's behavior change and because it's long-term. How scientific and how empirical is it? And this platform says, yes, it is, and yes, it can be. And it will be very interesting for those of us in the field to engage with it on a deeper level. At this juncture, I'd like to open the floor to Q&A. We have a Q&A box where you could input your questions. I think we have 2 questions already, and I'm going to ask Marilyn to help me to bring our guests off mute. We have a question from Melika. Good afternoon, greetings. Melika, do you want to come off mute to ask your question, and then our speakers can engage with you?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly.
Thank you so very much for wonderful presentations. I am engaged with the Liberian Women Empowerment Project, and I'm following from my phone. So I would appreciate if you could read my questions and respond, because it is difficult for me to switch from the screen. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Melika. I'll read the question for the guests and everybody online. According to your experience with which participatory evaluation methodology works well with rural women and men in Africa? And there's a part 2. Do you have an evaluation report to highlight as a methodologically good regardless of findings? Many thanks for your time. Monica, would you like to attempt first, and then Svetlana?
Yeah. No, thanks a lot for your question, Melika. I think if you are working in West Africa, I mean, there are like thousands of participatory methods that are used. there are different ones when you are in French-speaking West Africa. But if you're in Liberia, I mean, in our evaluation, we even look at these household methodologies that I mentioned, the gender action learning system, for instance. All of them are participatory methods that try to uncover like what are the power dynamics at the household, and then they go to the community level. So I think any household methodology can be used. And I think, of course, they are bringing, and I see connected some of the gender experts from IFAD that have lots of experience on that. That's different from saying that we, as independent evaluators, we usually don't manage to use lots of participatory approaches in our evaluations, sometimes because of lack of time. Or budget, because as you know, like it requires more time. But if you are engaged in project implementation, I think those methodologies are there, and of course any other from the participatory rural appraisal family, right? That's what I could share. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica. Svetlana, do you want to add to that?
I would not add anything because both evaluations that I've done recently are not kind of at that level. And in this particular evaluation, in fact, interestingly, I forgot to mention the most important part. We didn't do field work. And it's interesting that actually the management of the platform itself, they specifically said, we don't think that, you know, there is a need to kind of go anywhere and talk to anybody because it is around virtual space and the platform. So that's, I would say, the opposite of what I can offer in this particular instance. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We have Ernest as well. Ernest, do you want to come off mute to ask your question?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ernest.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
Ernest.
Are you hear me?
Yes.
First, I want to thank you for your amazing presentation about this kind of issues. And my question was, according to your topic, I was wondering to ask, to handle this root of cause of this issue, to recruit many women as evaluators in different programs or different projects. It is a good strategy to handle this kind of gender inequality in the evaluation sector.
Are you talking about in the particular evaluations or in the evaluation sector? I think there are plenty of women, so I don't think there is a problem with the gender in the sector. But what is it kind of more detail, more nuancing? What is your question about?
If I can try what I read from the question also of Ernest, that written, I think he added some nuance. I think when his question is more about if we want to evaluate how the root causes of gender inequality were addressed by a project, do we need more women doing that? Because maybe there is a kind of barrier of a man interviewing or evaluating that. My experience with this evaluation, we did some field work in very conservative context. And I don't think it's just about being a man or a woman, but it's about having the cultural sensitivity of where you are doing your field work and your data collection. And in any case, you always need local consultants or like interpreters and so on. But it's true that even for IFAD projects, we found that in very conservative contexts, having extensionists or staff of the implementing agencies that are women could allow certain women, the most vulnerable in the most conservative places, to participate of projects because the cultural norms like prevent them to interact with other men. So if it's about addressing the root causes of gender inequality in very conservative places, yes, maybe we need also like more women on the field side. But I agree with Svetlana. I think the evaluation discipline or sector, I think we are majority, and working in gender is even worse. In fact, gender is not just about women, it should be about equality. And look at our panel and our so but very, very good question. Thank you, Ernest.
Thanks so much, Ernest. We have a hand raised. Madhavan, would you like to come off mute to ask your question? Madhavan, you can go ahead. Okay. Madhavan, if you're not ready, we'll move on to Bayene.
How are we working on evaluations?
How long?
How are we working on AI evaluations? How are we working on AI evaluations?
DI? Disability?
Evaluations.
The key word that we're missing, one word that is important and we don't hear it.
Maybe you can write your question down.
AI evaluations.
Anybody from the audience, do you hear it differently?
How are we working on AI evaluations?
AI.
Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
How we did not use the kind of artificial intelligence as it's known in this particular evaluation. So I would not be, I mean, of course, now it was 2 years later, there's so much that happened in the AI space. So I think we could have used some of the methodologies and approaches, but we did not in this particular evaluation.
Thank you.
We did not use it either, but we tried to use artificial intelligence for the executive summary to see what the machine was saying.
Right.
Which is very interesting application, but not to synthesize or to crunch lots of data as it's usually used. No.
There are issues of confidentiality. If you download. I mean, there's a lot written now. In fact, I feel like every day on LinkedIn, there's everything about artificial intelligence. But with interviews and, if you want to do synthesis of interview notes, there's a lot of confidentiality issues. And the fact that, for example, ChatGPT would basically own materials if you download it there. So we use usually Max-QDA for analysis, for example, if we need to, but it's not, I guess, artificial intelligence. And in a way, it's standard software in the evaluation profession.
We do have United Nations CEPD committee of experts with big data. They are trying to use some sort of AI and some sort of already available AI tools for our purpose, evaluation purposes. So are we trying to collaborate over there? Just asking. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhavan, for your contributions and your question, but there's always room for collaboration. And I suppose if you leave your details in the chat, we can always collaborate and discuss further. Of course, these platforms are for networking and for having separate conversations to expand. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another hand raised. I'm not sure if it's still raised. Was it Bayene? Would you like to come off mute? Bayene Mecca. You can go ahead.
Hello. I'm really very much delighted by the presentation that I heard. from Monica and also Svetlana. I don't know whether I pronounce it from both of you. But just what I want to know, or maybe that will be very much an incentive for many of the audiences, and again, any other programs or projects that are working on GEWE, gender equality and economic women economic empowerment programs, because we are just striving for with this kind of project for about a decade or 2 or 3, okay, on gender equality and women economic empowerment. So just especially I am from Africa. So when we see these old projects and programs that are that were undertaken, we didn't find them that, or we didn't know what results that have resulted. So would you share us your experiences with regard to the results of this kind of projects that are implemented by IFAD or CGIAR or any other program with regard to attaining gender equality? If you have any specific examples that you can get me, that would be better. For example, with a number of data in this country or in this or at a continental level, how much gender equality on the women economic empowerment are currently achieved, or to what extent we are in a line or in a path to attain this gender equality and women economic empowerment. Both, even the gender equality issue is not only the Africans or the Asians, but also it is the issue of the developed countries. So just, I want to hear your experiences with regard to this one. That may be just be an incentive for me to just, not only for me, for many of the projects or programs that are working or implementing these programs in their own respective countries, okay? I want to hear. I'm sorry, am I clear? Because I'm a very result seeker person, so I need to see the gender, how much the gender equality, so much, and women economic empowerment is so far has been attained, or to what extent we are in a path to it. Am I clear? I'm sorry.
You're clear, you're clear. Thank you so much, Bayane. And I think just to paraphrase, Bayane is asking about, I think more or less, the indicators and how gender equality or gender transformative results are measured and captured. And of course, Bayane, these are going to be different for different countries. There's a gender equality index for different countries that go in depth on the results. But maybe Svetlana and Monica, you can speak to your context of CGIAR and IFAD and how, like, the sort of indicators you use and how gender equality and economic empowerment are actually measured. And I know, Monica, in your presentation, you did allude to the categories of measurement. Over.
You want to go first, Svetlana?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for the independent evaluation offices in general, we basically, it's out of scope for us to, develop indicators, but we use the data that is collected by the system in the evaluations. At least that applies to me. And I did actually include a link to the evaluation of African Development Bank that I managed when I was at the evaluation of the African Development Bank. But I think in general, it's understanding, what the priorities are at the country level, at the organizational level, and starting from scratch, integrating those priorities, whether the target is to empower women, whether the target is to, engage with the rural communities, with the most vulnerable. It has to start at the design, because oftentimes there is this belief that evaluations, no matter how transformative, feminist they are, they can basically pull out information that might not be there, or the things that, you know, were not there to start with. So it's this balance about what is important, you know, when, and what the role of evaluation is. And that's why, you know, I highlighted this, for example, for us example of bringing the monitoring evaluation expert as a recommendation, because it is important when you implement that there is somebody who can help design the program, design monitoring evaluation system of a program to continuously bring out those results. But there's so many indicators out there. I won't even start. You know, there's many, but yeah, good luck, Monica.
Yeah, maybe what I could share, like in a very practical way, it's the online evaluation manual of IFAD. And IFAD is quite particular because as I mentioned in my presentation, we have the gender marker about how gender is included, mainstream from design to evaluation. And in the evaluation manual, you are going to find what are the questions that we are using for a specific gender equality and women's empowerment criterion. So in addition to the usual OCDE DAG evaluation criteria of relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, in IFAD, in every single evaluation, we look at what is the contribution of IFAD for gender equality and women's empowerment. And this is a standalone criterion. So in the link I put right now, I hope in the chat, yeah, I think you can see it there. There are two parts of this manual. In the first one, it's more theoretical. In the second one is the different types of evaluations. And then you will find in the annex the types of questions that we try to systematically ask, even if the project was not meant to have like specific objectives on gender, because for us it's mainstream. Like any single intervention needs to mainstream gender. And then the other piece of work I could share in case it can inspire you, as you said, it's an evaluation synthesis on gender that we did here in IFAD in 2017. And of course, the one that I presented will be on the same website by the end of this year. So you will also see what are the types of indicators and the whole analysis we have done. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Monica, and thanks so much, Svetlana. There's a question in the chat by Laura Rom. Thanks for your presentations. Laura, do you want to come off mute or?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this rich debate and your insightful presentations. I was participating as a reference member in a UN system-wide evaluation synthesis on SDG 5. I posted that in the chat, which might be of interest to you. It just came out and was launched last week. We also gave a presentation on that yesterday. For those who have missed it, we will post it on the gLOCAL website. Our session was on monitoring SDG 5. So this is something really close to my heart. And I wonder, how do you in your work evaluate social norm change? How do you measure the impact of social norm change interventions? Because in that report, we identified that this remains a core barrier, and there's a lack of systematic measurement for anything around social norm change. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Svetlana, do you want to attempt first?
Yeah, I can start that. In the particular evaluation that I presented, we did not look at the norms change per se kind of externally. It was the big focus of the evaluation was norm changing internally. That to understand and appreciate attention to gender in the design of the interventions. So in that way, of course, the recommendations were relating to more kind of output in terms of participation of men and women, and because there are not that many female scientists as well. So it's actually changing kind of norms around who does research. And when we're talking about research and science in CGIAR, it's hard science, it's biophysical science, it's not social science. So even changing shift from focus to biophysical science to social science is a norm change, and understanding that in the design of interventions, in their monitoring, you need all kinds of sciences and social science can help with kind of the people aspect of even thinking about norms, and then of course taking it forward to designing internal external strategies of how to change them. So that's at the level of the platform specifically. But we are looking into this in the ongoing evaluation of science groups, and it's for us, the starting points are very different than it would be for IFAD. So I'll just kind of leave that at that, but stay tuned for results.
Thanks so much. Over to you, Monica.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think our finding from this thematic evaluation was exactly the same one as Laura said, unfortunately, that there is no systematic measurement. And what we found, and of course, to see these changes in social norms, you have to go to the field, right? And ask people and try to see what they say. And for IFAD, I think, as for many other partners, the issue is attribution. Even if there has been a social norm preventing like the equal participation of women and men, can you attribute that to the intervention of IFAD? So the language that we use in this thematic evaluation and in the conclusions is everywhere. It's like the role of IFAD is to catalyze change that has to be locally owned and nationally pushed. So I don't think anyone from outside, any big donor can come and say like, this is the way. It has to be like a gradual change that the own communities want to take with local champions, with national champions. And I think the role of IFAD and any other partner is to catalyze, to accompany that process. So we found some experiences where people said like, yeah, since now we have women who are like camel breeders. This has changed the total game in the community, because before women were like not allowed to be in this role. So we found some of these cases, but to say that this is systematic or it's measured systematically, we are way far from this. And in our case also, these social norms, we try to look at the community level, to the regional level, the national level, to see if the social norms get institutionalized with certain like written norms or socially accepted. But what we found was not systematic in every single country case study where we went. But I think it's normal because these changes, this social change, transformational change, takes time, and it has every society has its own pace, right?
Thanks so much, Monica. Is there a last question? I think we need to wrap up.
I think there is one written down. This is what Renata is telling you from Anis on the question Q&A.
Okay, in the Q&A. Okay, let me.
Anis, I don't know if I pronounced properly.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to read it out loud in the interest of time. What are some of the key contextual and implementation factors that should be considered by evaluators for gender transformative changes? Are there any particular factors related to fragile states such as Yemen or any other conflict countries? Thank you.
If I can also take that one.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. We only did one case study in a fragile part of one country in Cameroon. And what we found is that our approaches are not adapted to fragile or conflict situations. We tend to work in the same way, and sometimes just changing the implementing partners. In this case, it's like, okay, the government cannot enter, so we use NGOs. But our analysis and our focus groups discussions with those people who unfortunately are going through these difficult times was like, you should be treated in a different way, and we should analyze what is happening to you in a different way for men and women, and try to see what are the differential impacts and how the projects could adapt their interventions to that. But I think it's something that IFAD is going to be working on in the coming years. But it was something that we mentioned in the evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the presentation to our speakers, and thank you so much to all the participants for the rich engagement. I think this session was really excellent. There are so many key takeaways. I think the one I really want to highlight is for us to strengthen male involvement in gender transformative work, in evaluations on gender transformative work and results. And I know there are some men on here who have shown some rich interest, and I think that that's a big one. And of course, to remember that social norms and change at that level takes a very long time to shift those norms, and all of our efforts collectively contribute to making that difference. I think there's no single effort that will help us to reach our goal of gender equality and women empowerment. Over to Renata to close, and thank you for your time here, everybody.
Thank you, Justine, Svetlana, and Monica, for a rich session, and thanks to participants who had very interesting questions. I just want to say that you will receive the recordings of this webinar soon in your email, and that the presentations by Svetlana and Monica will also be available on the EvalForward website. So it's past 5 o'clock here in Rome, so thanks for your participation, and see you soon next time. Thank you all. Bye-bye.